Welcome to Peacetime Story, a place where your mind can rest and your heart can find calm. Here, every story is told with love, comfort, and a touch of mystery, designed to gently guide you into a world of relaxation and peaceful sleep. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe and become a part of our Peacetime Story family. Together, we'll create a space where every night ends with calmness, comfort, and sweet dreams. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's journey. The Fatal Guest, Hercule Poirot and the Midnight Murder. Chapter 1, The Arrival of Shadows. In the gloaming of an autumn evening in the year 1925, Harrington Manor loomed like a sentinel against the encroaching dusk, its Tudor facade etched with the intricate tracery of ivy that clung to its weathered stones like the veins upon the hand of an ancient dowager. Nestled amidst the undulating hills of the Sussex countryside, the manor house exuded an air of faded grandeur, its mullioned windows gazing out upon manicured lawns that sloped gently toward a copse of venerable oaks, their leaves whispering secrets to the chill wind that heralded the approach of night. The sky above was a canvas of bruised purples and sullen grays, pregnant with the promise of a tempest, while the air carried the earthy tang of impending rain mingled with the faint, acrid scent of wood smoke from the village beyond. It was into this atmospheric tableau that the guests arrived, their carriages crunching upon the gravel drive with a rhythmic cadence that bespoke both anticipation and a subtle undercurrent of unease. Sir Reginald Harrington, the master of this domain, stood upon the threshold, a figure of imposing authority whose presence commanded the scene as surely as a general surveys his troops. At 58 years of age, Sir Reginald was a man forged in the crucibles of industry, his frame robust and unyielding, clad in a dinner jacket of impeccable cut that accentuated his broad shoulders and barrel chest. His hair, once raven black, had yielded to the inexorable march of time, now a steely gray that matched the flinty hue of his eyes that pierced with the acuity of one accustomed to dissecting balance sheets and human frailties alike. His countenance was furrowed with lines etched by decades of relentless ambition, for he had risen from the soot-choked mills of Manchester to amass a fortune in steel and machinery, leaving in his wake a trail of vanquished rivals and whispered scandals. Yet beneath this veneer of unassailable command lurked a psyche scarred by the betrayals he had both inflicted and endured. A man who trusted few and loved even fewer, his heart a fortress guarded by suspicion and pride. Among the first to alight from his conveyance was Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective whose reputation preceded him like a fanfare. Poirot stepped down with meticulous grace, his patent leather shoes gleaming, even in the dim light, his egg-shaped head inclined slightly as he surveyed the manor with those piercing green eyes that missed naught. His mustaches, waxed to perfection and curling upward like the wings of a vigilant bird, framed a mouth that often curved into a smile of ironic amusement. Clad in a tailored overcoat and carrying a silver-topped cane, Poirot exuded an aura of fastidious elegance, his movements precise and economical. His mind, that labyrinthine repository of logic and intuition, ever probed the depths of human frailty, seeking the elusive symmetry in the chaos of motives and misdeeds. Invited ostensibly for a weekend of leisure, Poirot harbored no illusions. Such gatherings among the elite often concealed vortices of intrigue, and his little gray cells tingled with the foretaste of enigma. The suspects, for in the omniscient weave of fate, they were destined to become such, formed a quintet of souls as diverse as they were entangled in the web of Sir Reginald's life. Each bore the weight of hidden motives, their psyches a mosaic of resentment, ambition, and desperation, veiled beneath the polished facade of civility. Lady Evelyn Harrington, Sir Reginald's wife of 2 decades, descended from her carriage with the poise of a woman accustomed to the gaze of society. At 42, she retained an ethereal beauty that time had softened rather than eroded. Her raven hair cascaded in lustrous waves, framing a face of porcelain delicacy, with eyes like stormy seas that held depths of unspoken sorrow. Slender and graceful in a gown of emerald silk that whispered with each step, she moved with the languid elegance of one born to privilege. Yet her psychological profile revealed a spirit chafed by confinement. Married young for the security of Harrington's wealth, she had endured a union barren of affection, her husband's domineering nature stifling her innate vivacity. Within her breast simmered a suppressed resentment, a yearning for autonomy that manifested in fleeting glances of defiance and a subtle tremor in her hands when his name was spoken. Her motive, though unarticulated, whispered of inheritance and liberation, a life unshackled from the gilded cage of matrimonial tyranny. Following closely was Colonel Marcus Thorne, a retired military man whose bearing evoked the rigid discipline of the barracks. 55 years old, with a broad-shouldered frame honed by campaigns in distant colonies, his ruddy complexion spoke of outdoor pursuits and perhaps an excess of port. His mustache bristled like a row of bayonets, and his eyes, a faded blue, held the steely glint of one who had stared down adversity. Dressed in a tweed suit that strained slightly at the seams, Thorne carried himself with the bluff hardiness of the officer class, yet his psyche was a bastion of bitterness. Sir Reginald had once outmaneuvered him in a speculative venture, stripping Thorne of his modest fortune and leaving him to subsist on a pensioner's pittance. This financial ruin had festered like an untreated wound, breeding a motive rooted in revenge, a desire to reclaim honor and rectify the scales of justice through whatever means necessary. Miss Clara Beaumont, the victim's secretary, arrived with the unobtrusive efficiency that defined her existence. A spinster of 38, she possessed a sharp-featured countenance, with spectacles perched upon a beak-like nose and mousy hair pinned in a severe bun that accentuated her angular jaw. Her attire was practical, a gray woolen dress devoid of ornament, mirroring a life devoted to order and subservience. Yet her mind was a vault of secrets, meticulous and unyielding, harboring an envy that gnawed at her core. As Sir Reginald's confidant in matters of business, she had borne witness to his illicit affairs and dubious embezzlements, her efficiency masking a simmering resentment toward the man who treated her as a mere appendage. Unrequited passions, perhaps, or the sting of perpetual invisibility fueled her motive. Blackmail turned lethal, or a bid for the recognition she craved. Dr. Julian Forsyth, the family physician, alighted next, his lanky form unfolding like a stork from the carriage. 45 years of age, with pallid skin that suggested long hours in shadowed consulting rooms, he adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses with a habitual gesture, his eyes, hazel and inscrutable, betraying little. Clad in a somber frock coat, Forsyth exuded an air of intellectual detachment, his movements deliberate and unhurried. His psychological profile unveiled a core of arrogance tempered by insecurity. Indebted to Sir Reginald for concealing a medical scandal that could have ruined his practice, he navigated a precarious balance of gratitude and dread. This hidden motive, fear of exposure or escalating monetary desperation, lurked beneath his placid exterior, a shadow that could propel even the healer toward harm. Lastly, the enigmatic Mr. Victor Langdon, a suave investor whose arrival completed the assemblage. 39 and in the prime of his predatory vigor, Langdon possessed slicked-back hair of ebony sheen, a charming smile that disarmed, and eyes that gleamed with the cunning of a fox in the henhouse. His tailored suit bespoke continental flair, and he moved with the fluid assurance of one versed in boardrooms and boudoirs. His psyche was a tapestry of opportunism, unburdened by scruples. As a rival in the industrial arena, he coveted Harrington's empire, plotting acquisitions that demanded the removal of obstacles. Greed and corporate conquest formed his motive, a ruthless ambition cloaked in affable charm. As the guests converged upon the drawing room, a chamber resplendent with Persian rugs underfoot, crystal chandeliers overhead, and walls lined with ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow every movement. The atmosphere thickened with the unsaid. A fire crackled in the immense hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters across the polished oak paneling. Decanters of sherry gleamed upon a sideboard, their amber contents promising warmth against the chill without. Sir Reginald raised his glass in a toast, his voice booming with forced joviality. "To old friends and new ventures, may fortune smile upon us all." Lady Evelyn smiled faintly, her lips curving without warmth. "Indeed, darling, though some ventures, one finds, culminate in profound regret." Colonel Thorne grunted, his ruddy face darkening. "Regrets? I've had my fill, courtesy of certain acquaintances whose dealings lack honor." Miss Beaumont adjusted her spectacles, her voice crisp and measured. "Sir, the accounts are in impeccable order, as ever they have been." Dr. Forsythe nodded absently, his tone detached. "Health to all, then. In these uncertain times, it is a commodity not to be squandered." Mr. Langdon chuckled, a sound like silk over steel. "And prosperity, Sir Reginald. May it ever favor the bold and the astute." Poirot, ensconced in a wingback chair, observed this interplay with the acuity of a maestro discerning dissonant notes in a symphony. "Mon Dieu," he murmured to himself, his fingers steepled in contemplation. "The air, it is thick with the unsaid, pregnant with the seeds of discord." As thunder rumbled distantly, like the god's displeasure echoing across the heavens, Poirot's keen gaze alighted upon a scrap of fabric snagged upon the edge of the mantel, a silken thread, incongruous in its delicacy amid the robust furnishings. A red herring, perhaps, or the inaugural filament in the intricate tapestry of impending doom. The little gray cells stirred, alert to the symphony of human frailties unfolding before him. The evening progressed with desultory conversation, the guests orbiting Sir Reginald like planets drawn inexorably to a sun whose light concealed scorching heat. Lady Evelyn spoke of the latest London fashions, her words laced with a subtle barb toward her husband's parsimony. Colonel Thorne regaled the company with tales of imperial glory, his anecdotes veering toward grievances against those who profited from others' toil. Miss Beaumont interjected with facts and figures, her efficiency a shield against personal revelation. Dr. Forsythe contributed medical anecdotes, his detachment a veil for deeper anxieties. Langdon, ever the charmer, steered discourse toward business prospects, his probes eliciting guarded responses from the host. Yet beneath this veneer of sociability, tensions simmered. Poirot noted the fleeting glances, Lady Evelyn's eyes lingering on Langdon with a spark of intrigue, Thorne's fist clenching at Sir Reginald's boast of recent acquisitions. Beaumont's lips pursing at a casual dismissal of her labors. Forsyth's pallor deepening at mention of past favors. Langdon's smile sharpening like a blade. As the grandfather clock in the hall chimed the hour, its solemn toll resonating through the manor like a harbinger, the storm broke at last. Rain lashed the leaded windows with vehement fury, the wind howling through the chimneys in mournful lament. The guests retired to their chambers, each carrying the weight of unspoken burdens, while Poirot lingered, his mind awhirl with the nascent threads of mystery. Little did they know that the shadows gathering were not merely those of the night, but harbingers of a midnight murder that would test the limits of deception and deduction. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Night. As the last echoes of the grandfather clock's chime faded into the enveloping darkness, Harrington Manor seemed to hold its breath, the very walls absorbing the palpable undercurrents of disquiet that had permeated the evening's discourse. The storm, which had hitherto threatened from afar, now unleashed its fury upon the Sussex countryside with unbridled vehemence. Rain cascaded in torrents against the ancient panes, transforming the manor's stately silhouette into a bastion besieged by the elements. Within, the corridors, lined with tapestries depicting chivalric scenes long faded by time, echoed with the mournful howl of wind insinuating itself through unseen crevices, as if the spirits of the departed Harringtons lamented the intrigues unfolding beneath their ancestral roof. Sir Reginald Harrington, oblivious or perhaps defiantly indifferent to the atmospheric portents, retired to his study, a sanctum of masculine opulence where the air was redolent with the mingled aromas of aged leather, cigar smoke, and the faint, metallic tang of ink from his voluminous ledgers. The room, illuminated by the subdued glow of a green-shaded desk lamp, was a testament to his dominion. Walls adorned with hunting trophies from African safaris, a massive oak desk cluttered with documents of industrial conquest, and a sideboard bearing crystal decanters that gleamed like jewels in the lamplight. At this hour, approaching midnight, Sir Reginald adhered to his inviolable ritual, a solitary brandy, sipped contemplatively as he reviewed the day's triumphs and plotted tomorrow's stratagems. His psyche, ever a fortress of self-assurance, harbored no premonition of peril. Yet, in the recesses of his mind, flickered the shadows of enmities sown through years of ruthless ambition. He poured the amber nectar into a balloon glass, swirling it with a practiced hand, the liquid's viscosity a metaphor for the entanglements that bound his guests to him. Unbeknownst to the master of the house, shadows stirred throughout the manor, each guest ensnared in the labyrinth of their own nocturnal ruminations. Lady Evelyn Harrington, in the seclusion of her boudoir, a chamber of feminine elegance with silk draperies and a four-poster bed swathed in damask, paced the Aubusson carpet with the restless grace of a caged panther. Her emerald gown had been exchanged for a negligee of diaphanous lace, yet her mind remained clad in the armor of suppressed indignation. At 42, her beauty was a weapon she wielded with subtlety, but tonight her stormy eyes betrayed the tempest within, a confluence of resentment toward her husband's autocratic rule and a flickering ember of desire for emancipation. If only, she whispered to the flickering candle flame, her fingers absently clutching a small vial upon her dressing table. Was it merely perfume, that innocuous elixir of jasmine and regret, or something more insidious? Her psychological profile, a tapestry woven from years of subjugation, revealed a woman capable of calculated resolve. The motive of inheritance loomed large, promising a life unyoked from matrimonial chains, perhaps even the freedom to pursue whispers of affection glimpsed in Mr. Langdon's charming gaze. In a guest chamber down the hall, Colonel Marcus Thorne sat before a modest writing desk, his broad frame hunched in contemplation as he methodically polished his service revolver, a relic from the Boer War, its barrel etched with the patina of campaigns long concluded. The storm's thunder evoked memories of artillery barrages, stirring within him a martial fervor tempered by the acrid taste of defeat. At 55, Thorne's ruddy complexion flushed deeper in the lamplight, his bristling mustache twitching with suppressed ire. His psyche was a bastion besieged by bitterness. The financial ruination inflicted by Sir Reginald's shrewd maneuvers had reduced him to a shadow of his former self, pension-bound and pride-wounded. "That cad Harrington," he muttered through clenched teeth, his fingers gripping the weapon with a fervor that bespoke more than mere maintenance. "He'll pay for his perfidy." Revenge simmered like a slow-burning fuse, a motive as straightforward as a bayonet charge, yet veiled in the colonel's bluff exterior. Did he slip from his room that night, revolver in hand, or was it merely the catharsis of ritual that stayed his hand? Adjoining the library, Miss Clara Beaumont perched at a secretaire, her sharp features illuminated by the glow of a reading lamp as she pored over a ledger pilfered from Sir Reginald's study earlier that evening. The room, a repository of knowledge with shelves groaning under tomes of history and finance, provided a sanctuary for her meticulous mind. 38 and unadorned, her mousy hair pinned with austere precision, Beaumont's spectacles magnified eyes that darted with the acuity of a hawk spotting prey. Her psychological essence was one of efficiency alloyed with envy. Privy to her employer's clandestine affairs, embezzlements that lined his pockets while she toiled in obscurity, she harbored a resentment that festered like an untended ulcer. A discrepancy in the accounts caught her eye. A forged entry, perhaps, siphoning funds to an unknown beneficiary. "He thinks me blind," she hissed, her thin lips curling in disdain. Motive intertwined with opportunity, blackmail, unrequited devotion, or a bid for the wealth she catalogued but never possessed. Had she ventured to the study, ledger in tow, to confront or to condemn? Dr. Julian Forsyth wandered the dimly lit corridors, his lanky silhouette elongated by the flickering gas lamps that lined the walls. Ostensibly checking on a guest's purported ailment, a convenient pretext, he carried his black leather satchel, its contents a pharmacopoeia of remedies and, perchance, requisites more lethal. 45 and pallid as parchment, Forsyth's wire-rimmed glasses reflected the storm's lightning flashes, his hazel eyes concealing depths of intellectual arrogance masking profound insecurity. His psyche navigated the treacherous waters of obligation. Indebted to Sir Reginald for burying a scandalous surgical mishap that could have stripped him of his license, he existed in a state of perpetual apprehension. "One slip and all is undone," he murmured, pausing at a window to gaze into the roiling night. Fear of exposure, compounded by monetary desperation from mounting debts, formed a motive as insidious as the poisons in his possession. Did his nocturnal perambulations lead him to the study, vial in hand? Meanwhile, upon the rain-lashed veranda, Mr. Victor Langdon lounged in a wicker chair, defying the elements as he drew upon a Havana cigar, its ember glowing like a malevolent eye in the gloom. 39 and exuding the polish of cosmopolitan intrigue, his slicked-back hair resisted the damp, his charming smile a facade for the cunning predator within. His psychological profile was a symphony of opportunism, unencumbered by moral qualms. As a rival investor, he eyed Harrington's empire with avaricious intent, plotting a hostile takeover that necessitated the removal of its architect. "Prosperity favors the bold," he echoed his earlier toast, exhaling smoke that mingled with the mist. Greed and corporate conquest propelled him. Had he slipped indoors, cigar discarded, to enact a scheme forged in boardroom shadows? Hercule Poirot, ensconced in his allotted chamber, a room of understated luxury with velvet curtains and a canopied bed, feigned slumber, his egg-shaped head propped upon plumped pillows, his mustaches immaculate even in repose. Yet his little gray cells remained vigilant, attuned to the manor's symphony of creaks and sighs. A subtle anomaly drew him forth, a floorboard's groan in the corridor, rhythmic and purposeful. Slipping into a silk dressing gown, Poirot ventured silently into the hall, his patent leather slippers muffling his steps. Through a crack in the door, he glimpsed a shadowy figure gliding toward the study, a glimpse too fleeting for identification, yet pregnant with implication. At precisely midnight, as the grandfather clock intoned its solemn dirge, Sir Reginald sipped his brandy, the liquid warming his throat with deceptive comfort. A moment's repose, then a convulsion seized him. He clutched at his collar, eyes bulging in astonishment, as the cyanide's insidious grip constricted his airways. The glass shattered upon the Persian rug, amber, rivulets spreading like accusations. He collapsed, his robust frame crumpling in silent agony, the odor of bitter almonds pervading the air, a harbinger of poison most foul. The household erupted into chaos at Lady Evelyn's piercing scream, her discovery of the body rending the night. "Reginald! Oh, merciful God, no!" she wailed, her composure shattered, hands fluttering like wounded birds. Poirot arrived with alacrity, his demeanor unflappable amid the tumult. "Messieurs, mesdames, a tragedy most profound has befallen us. We must seal this chamber forthwith, lest the threads of evidence unravel." Clues materialized in the lamplight's scrutiny. Footprints imprinted upon the muddied carpet near the window, delicate, too small for a man's boot, suggesting a feminine intruder. Yet the storm's ingress might have obfuscated their origin. A timeline emerged, fraught with inconsistencies. Colonel Thorne professed a midnight stroll upon the veranda, but its shelter rendered his coat suspiciously dry. Miss Beaumont fidgeted, her alibi tenuous. "I was immersed in work within the library," she asserted, yet her ledger bore fresh ink stains, as if hastily concealed. Dr. Forsyth, summoned to confirm the demise, knelt beside the corpse, his pallor accentuating his detachment. "Poison, unequivocally. Cyanide. The scent of bitter almonds is unmistakable. Death was swift, within moments." Mr. Langdon arched an eyebrow, his charm undiminished. "Who among us could perpetrate such villainy?" Poirot stroked his mustache contemplatively, his green eyes scanning the assemblage. "Ah, but the little gray cells, they begin to dance, mes amis. The decanter bears no overt tampering, yet the residue whispers of treachery. Red herrings abounded, a misplaced glove upon the desk, embroidered with initials not matching the victim's, hinting at theft or intrusion, yet leading perchance to a cul-de-sac of deception. Behavior patterns crystallized, Thorne's bluster masking unease, Beaumont's evasion veiling complicity, Forsyth's aloofness a shield for culpability. As the storm raged unabated, the manor's inhabitants retreated to uneasy vigils, the whispers of the night now laden with accusation and dread. Poirot, alone in reflection, pondered the mosaic. physical evidence, psychological undercurrents, and the inexorable march toward revelation. Chapter 3. The Web of Deception. Dawn crept pallid and reluctant over the Sussex hills, its feeble light filtering through the remnants of the storm's fury to unveil a landscape as labyrinthine as the psyches ensnared within Harrington Manor's ancient walls. The fog, which had cloaked the manor in ethereal mystery through the night, lifted gradually, revealing dew-kissed lawns that stretched like a verdant carpet toward the distant oaks, their branches now still in the aftermath of the tempest. Yet the air retained a chill, a lingering breath of unease that permeated the house, where the tragedy of Sir Reginald's demise hung like a shroud over the assembled guests. The manor's facade, bathed in the ashen glow of morning, seemed to whisper of secrets long interred, its Tudor timbers creaking as if in reluctant confession. Hercule Poirot, ever the paragon of precision, had risen with the first blush of light, his toilette impeccable despite the nocturnal disturbances. Attired in a morning suit of dove-gray wool, his mustaches waxed to symmetrical perfection, he descended to the drawing-room, a chamber now transformed from convivial salon to impromptu tribunal. The Persian rugs underfoot muffled his steps, while the crystal chandeliers overhead caught the nascent sunlight, casting prismatic refractions that danced like elusive clues upon the walls. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as lancets, surveyed the room with the acuity of one who discerned not merely surfaces, but the subterranean currents of human deception. His little gray cells, invigorated by a nuit blanche of contemplation, hummed with the orchestration of facts and fallacies. The murder, he surmised, was no mere caprice but a meticulously woven web, its strands interlaced with motive, opportunity, and misdirection. Convening the suspects, for such they unequivocally were, Poirot summoned them with a note of unyielding authority, his Belgian accent lending an exotic gravitas to the proceedings. "Mes amis," he intoned as they assembled, their faces etched with varying degrees of fatigue and feigned innocence. "We must delve into the abyss of motive and machination. Each of you, in the tapestry of this tragedy, possesses threads of opportunity. Now we shall unravel the secrets that bind you to the departed." Lady Evelyn Harrington entered first, her ethereal beauty dimmed by the pallor of shock, her raven hair loosely pinned, and her attire a simple morning dress of muted lavender. At 42, she moved with the languid poise of aristocracy, yet her stormy eyes betrayed the turmoil within, a psychological maelstrom of resentment and residual affection. Seated upon a velvet settee, she clasped her hands in her lap, the subtle tremor therein a clue to suppressed rage. "What more is there to say, Monsieur Poirot?" she queried, her voice a silken thread, frayed at the edges. "Reginald was exacting, but I bore him no mortal enmity." Poirot inclined his egg-shaped head, his gaze piercing. "Ah, madame, but the heart, it harbors depths unplumbed. You confessed a quarrel yestereve. Pray, elaborate." Under his gentle yet inexorable probing, Lady Evelyn's composure cracked like fine porcelain. "He accused me of frivolity, of squandering his fortune on trifles, but it was he who hoarded affection like a miser." Her admission unveiled a motive steeped in liberation, the vast inheritance that would unshackle her from a union barren of warmth, perhaps allowing the flicker of intrigue with Mr. Langdon to ignite into flame. Colonel Marcus Thorne followed, his broad-shouldered frame rigid as a parade ground sentinel, his ruddy complexion heightened by indignation. 55 and clad in a tweed jacket redolent of pipe tobacco, he blustered into the room, mustache bristling. "This is preposterous. I demand to know why we're treated like common criminals." His psyche, a fortress of martial honor cracked by financial betrayal, revealed fissures under Poirot's scrutiny. "You professed a midnight stroll, mon colonel," Poirot observed. "Yet your boots bear no trace of the deluge, and the veranda's shelter leaves your coat unbesmirched." Thorne's alibi faltered. Footprints in the study mismatched his sturdy brogues, suggesting a deliberate misdirection. "Blast it, man, I stepped out briefly. Perhaps I avoided the puddles." Yet his clenched fists and averted gaze bespoke deeper grievances. The ruinous business venture where Sir Reginald's cunning had stripped him bare, fueling a revenge as implacable as a battlefield vendetta. Miss Clara Beaumont arrived with the unobtrusive precision of her secretarial vocation, her sharp features accentuated by the morning light filtering through the oriel windows. 38, with spectacles perched upon her beak-like nose and mousy hair in its habitual bun, she seated herself primly, her gray dress a camouflage of inconspicuousness. Her mind, a repository of efficiencies and envies, yielded to Poirot's interrogation like a ledger under audit. "You were in the library, mademoiselle, poring over accounts," Poirot noted. Yet a page torn from the ledger, discovered in the study, suggests confrontation. Beaumont adjusted her spectacles, her thin lips pursing. "A mere discrepancy, monsieur. Sir Reginald's irregularities were legion." Psychological clues emerged, her flushed cheeks, a behavioral anomaly betraying nerves or guilt. Her motive, a cocktail of blackmail and unrequited passion, for she had harbored illusions of elevation beyond her station, only to be rebuffed. Dr. Julian Forsyth entered languidly, his lanky form unfolding into an armchair, pallid skin contrasting with the room's warm hues. 45 wire-rimmed glasses framing hazel eyes of inscrutable depth, he exuded intellectual detachment, his frock coat impeccable. "This is most distressing," he murmured, his voice a measured cadence. Poirot probed. "You attested to seeing Mademoiselle Beaumont briefly, yet your satchel, doctor, contains remedies, and perchance poisons." Forsyth hesitated, his aloofness a mask for insecurity. A hidden motive surfaced: the medical scandal, a botched procedure concealed by Sir Reginald's influence, now leveraged as a Damoclean sword. "He held it over me," Forsyth admitted, his detachment fracturing. Debts mounted, exposure loomed. Fear and desperation intertwined, a psychological undercurrent as potent as the cyanide he could procure. Lastly, Mr. Victor Langdon sauntered in, his suave demeanor undiminished by the ordeal, slicked back hair gleaming and charming smile intact. 39, in a suit of continental cut, he lounged with the assurance of a predator at ease. "A grim business, Poirot," he remarked, his eyes gleaming with cunning. "I retired early, as I said. Yet timeline inconsistencies gnawed. A clock in the hall, stopped at 11:45, hinted at tampering to obscure movements. Langdon's psyche, a vortex of opportunism, concealed greed. Documents in Sir Reginald's study alluded to a hostile takeover, his empire coveted. "Prosperity demands boldness," Langdon quipped, but Poirot discerned the sharper edge beneath. As the interviews progressed, Poirot examined physical evidence with meticulous care. The scrap of silk from the study, matching Lady Evelyn's gown. "Non, mes amis," he declared. "It is planted, a red herring to ensnare the unwary. Behavior patterns crystallized. Thorne's aggressive bluster, Beaumont's evasive fidgeting, Forsyth's studied aloofness, all veils for deeper turmoils. Psychological clues abounded. Evelyn's trembling hands, Langdon's enigmatic smiles, each a thread in the web. In a moment of revelation, Poirot uncovered a clandestine liaison. Miss Beaumont and Mr. Langdon, their affair a secret forged in shared ambition. An intercepted note, concealed in Beaumont's reticule, spoke of rendezvous and plots. Collusion, perhaps? Poirot mused aloud, eliciting gasps. Motive amplified, embezzlement abetted by Beaumont's access, shielded by Langdon's charm, threatened by Sir Reginald's discovery. The storm had abated, but tension mounted like gathering clouds anew. Accusations flew. Thorne pointed at Forsyth. "You had the poisons," while Beaumont defended her honor with brittle denial. Lady Evelyn wept silently, her profile a study in conflicted sorrow. Poirot stood amidst the fray, his presence a bastion of order. "Patience, mesdames et messieurs. The web of deception tightens, but the little gray cells, they perceive the pattern. The murderer walks among us, their facade cracking under the weight of truth." As midday approached, the drawing room thrummed with unspoken dread, the air thick with the promise of further unravelings. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting elongated shadows that mirrored the elongated lies within. Poirot, stroking his mustache, pondered the mosaic. Inconsistencies and alibis, hidden motives of money and revenge, red herrings strewn like false trails in a fox hunt. The enigma deepened, drawing the suspects inexorably toward the precipice of exposure. Yet one thread remained elusive, a cyanide vial glimpsed in the garden's undergrowth, its discard hasty and telling. Whose hand had cast it there? The web trembled on the verge of rupture as the day wore on toward revelations yet unborn. Chapter 4. Threads unraveling. Midday sun filtered tentatively through the oriel windows of Harrington Manor, its golden rays piercing the lingering haze of the morning fog to cast elongated shadows across the polished parquet floors. Shadows that mirrored the elongated lies woven by the suspects in their intricate dance of deception. The Sussex countryside beyond the panes stretched in verdant repose, the storm's fury having yielded to a crisp autumnal clarity. Yet within the manor's hallowed halls, the atmosphere remained charged with the electricity of unspoken accusations. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax from freshly polished woodwork, mingled with the acrid undertone of spent hearths, as if the house itself exhaled the remnants of nocturnal treachery. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the pall of suspicion that enveloped the household, had commandeered the study, the very sanctum where Sir Reginald Harrington had met his untimely end. The room, with its mahogany panels absorbing the sunlight like a sponge, served as the epicenter of his deductions. Poirot paced the Persian rug with measured steps, his patent leather shoes clicking rhythmically upon the threads that bore the faint imprint of last night's chaos. His egg-shaped head tilted in contemplation, mustaches twitching as if attuned to invisible vibrations, while his green eyes darted with the precision of a maestro conducting an invisible orchestra. The little gray cells, those indefatigable engines of logic, whirred with the assimilation of clues, physical artifacts, psychological nuances, and the inexorable inconsistencies of human testimony. Assembling the suspects once more, Poirot gestured with his silver-topped cane toward the brandy decanter, now sequestered upon the desk like a silent witness. "Observe, mesdames et messieurs," he declared, his voice a melodious blend of authority and intrigue. The decanter of brandy, tampered with at precisely 11:55, as evidenced by the crystalline residue adhering to its neck. The cyanide, insidious and swift, was introduced mere moments before Sir Reginald's fatal indulgence. The group, clustered in uneasy proximity, shifted uncomfortably. Lady Evelyn upon a chaise longue, her porcelain features etched with fatigue. Colonel Thorne standing ramrod straight, arms folded in defiance. Miss Beaumont perched on the edge of a chair, spectacles glinting. Dr. Forsyth leaning against a bookcase, his lanky form a study in feigned nonchalance. And Mr. Langdon lounging with affected ease, a cigar unlit between his fingers. Inconsistencies in the timeline proliferated like fissures in a dam, threatening to unleash a torrent of revelations. Colonel Thorne's professed midnight stroll upon the veranda overlapped suspiciously with Miss Beaumont's vigil in the library, their alibis entwining in a knot of improbability. Mon Cornel, Poirot probed, his gaze unwavering. Your excursion, how is it that your boots remain pristine, unmarred by the deluge, while the garden path bears prints of a more precipitate nature? Thorne blustered, his ruddy cheeks flushing deeper. I confined myself to the covered portico, dash it all, no need to traipse through the muck. Yet the psychological undercurrent, his rigid honor cracked by financial humiliation, suggested a motive of revenge, a vendetta simmering since Sir Reginald's predatory business tactics had left him destitute. Delving deeper into the psyches of the assemblage, Poirot turned his scrutiny upon Lady Evelyn, whose ethereal beauty masked a reservoir of suppressed fury. Her profile, illuminated by the sun's oblique rays, revealed the subtle lines of a life constrained. Madame, Poirot intoned gently, your childhood, it was one of abandonment, no? A father departed prematurely, a mother ensnared in societal strictures. Such wounds fuel a vengeful heart. Lady Evelyn's stormy eyes welled with unshed tears, her hands clasping the fabric of her dress. I wished him dead, she admitted in a whisper that echoed like thunder in the hushed room. In moments of despair, his tyranny, it suffocated me. Her motive, liberation through inheritance, intertwined with a nascent intrigue toward Langdon, whose glances across the room spoke of unspoken alliances. Yet Poirot discerned a red herring in her candor. Too forthright, perhaps, to be the architect of such a calculated demise. Dr. Forsyth, his pallid skin contrasting with the warm hues of the study, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses under Poirot's piercing gaze. Docteur, your scandal, a botched surgery in your youth, concealed by Sir Reginald's beneficence, or rather, his leverage. Forsyth's detachment fractured, his voice trembling. He held it over me like a sword of Damocles, demanding repayments I could ill afford. The psychological profile unveiled a man of intellectual arrogance, besieged by insecurity, his debts mounting like a tide. Access to poisons inherent in his profession positioned him precariously, a hidden motive of desperation, fear of ruinous exposure, propelled him toward the precipice. I examined him post-mortem, Forsyth protested, but I swear I administered no fatal dose. Poirot nodded sagely, filing the denial amid the mosaic of deceptions. Mr. Langdon's greed emerged as a dominant thread, documents unearthed from Sir Reginald's desk, hastily rifled through in the night's confusion, revealing plots of a hostile takeover. Monsieur Langdon, Poirot observed, your investor's acumen is commendable, yet these papers speak of embezzlement abetted by an insider. Langdon's charming smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. Mere speculation, Poirot. Business is a battlefield. His psyche, a vortex of opportunism, concealed corporate conquest as motive. The affair with Miss Beaumont, now partially unveiled, suggested collusion, a shared ambition to usurp Harrington's empire upon his removal. Red herrings proliferated, designed to ensnare the unwary investigator. A poisoned letter discovered in the wastebasket, its contents a vitriolic missive from a disgruntled mill worker, was dismissed by Poirot as unrelated, a feint to divert attention from the intimate circle. "Non, this is extraneous," he declared, crumpling the paper. "The true venom resides within these walls." Misdirection peaked when Colonel Thorne, his bluster reaching a crescendo, accused Forsyth outright. "You had access to poisons, man. Your satchel reeks of opportunity." The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Evelyn gasping, Beaumont fidgeting, Langdon smirking enigmatically. Yet Poirot smiled, a curve of ironic amusement upon his lips. "Patience, mon cornet. The truth, it emerges like the phoenix from the ashes of falsehood." His little gray cells synthesized the clues. The cyanide vial unearthed in the garden's undergrowth, discarded hastily amid the rhododendrons, its stopper bearing fingerprints smudged by haste. Footprints leading from the veranda implicated Langdon, his cigar ash scattered nearby. Yet Poirot deemed it too obvious, a planted trail to mislead. "The perpetrator seeks to frame another," he mused aloud, "but the little details, they betray." Hidden motives intertwined like the ivy upon the manor's facade. Revenge for Thorne, monetary desperation for Forsyth and Beaumont, liberation for Lady Evelyn, and greed for Langdon. Secrets bound them in a Gordian knot. Beaumont's embezzlement, complicity with Langdon, Forsyth's scandalous debt, Thorne's ruined honor, all orbiting Sir Reginald's domineering son. As evening fell, the sun dipping toward the horizon and casting the study in amber twilight, Poirot gathered further clues from behavioral anomalies. Beaumont's flushed cheeks, a physiological betrayal of nerves or guilt. Evelyn's averted gaze when Langdon spoke. Thorne's compulsive polishing of his revolver glimpsed through a chamber door. The household dined in strained silence that night, the dining room's candlelit grandeur a stark contrast to the undercurrents of dread. Silver clinked upon china, the butler's footsteps echoing like judgments. Poirot, partaking sparingly of the consommé, observed the interplay. A furtive glance between Beaumont and Langdon, a tremor in Forsyth's hand as he lifted his wineglass. Thorne's glower fixed upon the empty head of the table. "The threads unravel," Poirot murmured to himself, "yet the final knot resists." Venturing into the garden as dusk deepened, Poirot retraced the footprints, his cane probing the softened earth. The vial, now in his possession, bore traces of a label, pharmaceutical linking back to Forsyth's satchel, or a misdirection. Psychological patterns coalesced, the arrogance of Langdon masking fear, the bitterness of Thorne veiling impotence, the envy of Beaumont fermenting into action. As stars pricked the velvet sky and the manor's lights flickered like watchful eyes, Poirot retired to contemplation, the chapter of unravelings building inexorably toward the eve of revelation. The web trembled, its architect poised for exposure, while the suspects slumbered uneasily, dreams haunted by the specter of justice. Chapter 5. The Little Gray Cell's Triumph. Twilight descended upon Harrington Manor like a velvet curtain drawn across the Sussex, hills enveloping the ancient edifice in a hush that belied the tumultuous revelations brewing within its walls. The sun, having yielded to the encroaching dusk, painted the sky in hues of indigo and crimson, while the air grew crisp with the promise of frost, carrying the faint, earthy aroma of fallen leaves mingled with the distant tang of wood smoke from the village chimneys. Inside, the drawing room crackled with an anticipation as palpable as the sparks leaping in the immense hearth, where logs hissed and popped in rhythmic counterpoint to the grandfather clock's inexorable ticking. Candles flickered in silver sconces, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusatory specters across the Persian rugs and ancestral portraits, their stern gazes seeming to judge the assembled souls below. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of this tableau, his diminutive frame a bastion of unassailable composure amid the eddying currents of dread. Attired in his impeccable evening suit, mustaches waxed to symmetrical precision, he surveyed the suspects with those piercing green eyes that penetrated the veils of deception like a scalpel through silk. The little gray cells, those tireless sentinels of logic, had labored through the day, synthesizing the mosaic of clues into a coherent masterpiece of deduction. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a melodious cadence that commanded the room's undivided attention. "The hour of truth has arrived. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrington was no mere impulse of passion, but a symphony of deception, orchestrated with the precision of a maestro. Gather close, for I, Hercule Poirot, shall illuminate the shadows." The suspects, drawn inexorably to this denouement, occupied their seats in uneasy formation. Lady Evelyn upon the settee, her raven hair framing a face pale as alabaster, her stormy eyes reflecting the inner gale of apprehension. Colonel Marcus Thorne, rigid in an armchair, his ruddy complexion mottled with tension, mustache bristling like a hedge of thorns. Miss Clara Beaumont, perched primly on a stool, her spectacles glinting in the candlelight, thin lips pursed in feigned indifference. Dr. Julian Forsyth, leaning against the mantel, his lanky form a silhouette of detachment, wire-rimmed glasses concealing hazel eyes fraught with unease, and Mr. Victor Langdon, lounging with affected nonchalance in a wing-back chair, his slicked-back hair impeccable, charming smile, a facade cracking at the edges. Poirot paced deliberately, his silver-topped cane tapping a rhythmic tattoo upon the floor, each step unraveling another thread in the tapestry of treachery. "Let us commence with the method of demise," he declared, gesturing toward an imaginary decanter. The cyanide in the brandy, administered by one who knew Sir Reginald's inviolable ritual intimately, one who could approach without arousing suspicion. Swift, silent, and insidious, it left the odor of bitter almonds as its signature, a clue overlooked by the hasty perpetrator. Enumerating the physical evidence with the flair of a lecturer unveiling arcane truths, Poirot continued. "Observe the scrap of fabric ensnared upon the study's mantel, a silken thread, ostensibly from Madame Harrington's gown. Yet, mes amis, it was planted, a deliberate red herring to implicate the innocent wife. The footprints upon the muddied carpet, delicate, suggesting a feminine intruder, were forged with shoes purloined from Mademoiselle Beaumont's chamber, another feint to mislead." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, eliciting a gasp from Lady Evelyn and a fidget from Beaumont. "And the cyanide vial, discarded in the garden's rhododendrons, its label pharmaceutical, linking to Dr. Forsyth's satchel. But non! The fingerprints upon it, smudged though they were, bore the imprint of a man's ring. Yours, Monsieur Langdon." Langdon's smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his cunning eyes, but Poirot pressed onward, delving into the psychological clues that formed the bedrock of his deductions. Behavior patterns, those subtle betrayals of the soul, have spoken volumes. Madame Harrington's trembling hands bespoke suppressed rage, yes, but also a lingering affection, a motive insufficient for such cold calculation. Mon Colonel, your aggressive bluster masked bitterness from financial ruin, yet your psyche, forged in the fires of honor, recoils from poison's cowardice. A revolver would be your weapon, no? Thorne grunted in affirmation, his posture easing fractionally. Turning to Miss Beaumont, Poirot's tone softened with ironic sympathy. Mademoiselle, your flushed cheeks and evasive glances revealed envy fermented into resentment. Your unrequited devotion to Sir Reginald, spurned in favor of his dalliances, coupled with knowledge of his embezzlements. Yet your efficiency is that of the accomplice, not the architect. Beaumont's spectacles slipped slightly, her sharp features contorting in denial. I merely catalogued his sins, she stammered. Dr. Forsyth received his scrutiny next, Poirot adjusting his mustache contemplatively. Docteur, your aloof detachment conceals insecurity. The scandal buried by Sir Reginald's influence hung over you like a guillotine, debts mounting as leverage tightened. Access to poisons positioned you perilously, but your intellectual arrogance would demand a more elegant demise, perhaps a misdiagnosed ailment, not this crude adulteration. The timeline inconsistencies, those chronological chasms, were laid bare with surgical precision. At midnight, all alibis falter like houses of cards in the wind. Montcornel claimed the veranda, yet his dry coat belies the deluge. Mademoiselle Beaumont professed the library, but ink stains fresh upon her fingers suggest haste. Dr. Forsyth wandered the halls, satchel in hand. Madame Harrington paced her boudoir. And you, Monsieur Langdon, asserted repose in your chamber, yet cigar ash in the study, still warm, betrays your presence. Langdon shifted, his charm evaporating like mist in sunlight. Hidden motives, those subterranean rivers of human frailty, surged to the surface under Poirot's relentless probing. Revenge for the colonel, fear for the doctor, liberation for the lady, envy for the secretary, but the core, greed and secrets intertwined. Sir Reginald, in his final hours, discovered an embezzlement scheme siphoning his fortunes, a plot orchestrated by Monsieur Langdon, abetted by Mademoiselle Beaumont, his clandestine paramour. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Beaumont's face drained of color, Langdon's eyes narrowing to slits. The affair, concealed in stolen glances and pilfered notes, bound them in ambition. Poison procured through Beaumont's access to the household stores, slipped into the decanter by Langdon during his feigned retirement. Red herrings unraveled like frayed yarn, the misplaced glove attributed to theft but planted by Langdon, the stopped clock tampered to obscure the precise moment, the poisoned letter, a diversion from external foes. All these, Poirot proclaimed, were veils to conceal the intimate betrayal. The footprints led to the veranda, your domain, Monsieur Langdon, too obvious, yet intended to implicate the colonel. Poirot halted before Langdon, his presence looming despite his stature. Mais oui, it is you, Monsieur Victor Langdon, who are the fatal guest. Your greed for Harrington's empire, threatened by his discovery of your embezzlements, sealed his fate. With Mademoiselle Beaumont's complicity, you administered the cyanide, envisioning a takeover unopposed. Langdon paled, his suave facade crumbling like ancient plaster. Preposterous, he blustered, but under Poirot's unyielding gaze, defiance withered. He would have ruined me, Langdon confessed, voice cracking. Expose the funds diverted, the affair, everything. Clara procured the poison. I slipped it in during a contrived visit to the study. It was to be seamless. Beaumont sobbed, her efficiency dissolving into remorse. I loved him. Victor, not Sir Reginald. The promise of wealth blinded me. Justice, swift as the poison it avenged, prevailed. The local constabulary, summoned by Poirot's discreet telegram, arrived to escort the culprits away. The manor sighed in collective relief, the shadows retreating as candles burned brighter. Lady Evelyn, tears tracing her cheeks, approached Poirot. Monsieur, your little gray cells have liberated us all. Thorne clapped him on the back. Damned fine work, old chap, Forsyth nodded gravely. A debt repaid. As the night deepened, Poirot stood upon the threshold, gazing at the star-studded firmament. The enigma resolved, order restored to chaos. Dear listener, thus concludes our tale of the fatal guest. Until the next mystery awakens the little gray cells, adieu, good night.